Good morning, Carver Cougars. This is Dr. Hollenbeck with this morning's announcements. Today is Thursday, November 29th, 2018. It's a great day to be a Carver Cougar. Well, Monday, December 3rd, it's the Carver Choir Concert at 6 o'clock p.m. I surely hope to see all of you there. And did you know? How many of you have checked out or have your parents check out our Carver website, d11.org/Carver, and you can see how many books were checked out for the day, for the month, and the school year. It's always exciting to see those numbers change because Carver Cougars love to read. Remember, we want to raise our attendance rate. We dropped a little bit from the other day. We're now down to 93.04%. When we talk about math numbers, that would be 93 4/400%. So let's make sure we get it up to 96%, and as soon as we do, it's a school-wide celebration. And talking of celebrations, congratulations, Miss M. Smith's class. You earned a no tardy popcorn party. Thank you for coming to school on time, and we are really excited for you. It's your first one. Congratulations. Remember, students, please take your coats to lunch with you. We don't want to have our coats hanging up in the hallway anymore. As you can see over here, coats fall on the floor, and then kids just walk on them. It's just one of those things that happen because it's a narrow hallway. So please keep your hood on your head or tie with the arms around your waist. If you need assistance with that, just let me know. I'd be glad to help you. Remember, this week we're focusing on Hall's procedures, and students, make sure that you're speaking in complete sentences. The teachers will remind you. By Friday, you should be at about 31% completion with Gigi. And it's now time for your math joke. Here we go. Why was the equal sign so humble? He knew he wasn't greater or less than anyone else. Now it's time for our problem of the day. But just as a reminder, what are context clues? Well, context clues can help you figure out the meanings of unfamiliar words. So I have a riddle for you, and this is how this works. See that word that's underlined? Kamanga? That's just a funny word, not a real word, a nonsense word. But you can figure out what the meaning of that could possibly be by using the context clues. So here we go. Mary rode her Kamanga to school yesterday. She could not ride it today, though, because it was raining. Her little sister Alice also has a Kamanga, but it still has training wheels on it because Alice is not old enough yet to ride without them. Remember, this is a riddle. So what is a Kamanga? That's a fake, fictitious word. Would you say a Kamanga is a car, a boat, or a bike? Remember, you're going to use your context clues. So here we go. Give a thumbs up if it's a car. Give it a thumbs up if it's a boat. Give a thumbs up if it's a bike. I hope you had fun with that riddle. And now it's time for us to watch a video about fractions. But this time we're going to be talking about adding, subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. And here we go.
Hi, and welcome to Math Antics. In the last video, we learned how easy it is to add and subtract fractions that have the same bottom number. We call those like fractions. But often you'll be asked to add or subtract fractions that have different bottom numbers, or unlike fractions. And we learned that the only way we can do that is to change our fractions so that they do have the same bottom number. Alright then, how do we do that? How can we change two unlike fractions into two like fractions? How do we get our fractions to have a common denominator? The answer is we need to use equivalent fractions. You remember what equivalent fractions are, right? They're fractions that have the same value but use different top and bottom numbers, like 1/2 and 2/4. They both represent 1/2 but with different numbers. Well, whenever we have two unlike fractions that we need to add, if we could find equivalent fractions to use instead, and if those new equivalent fractions had the same bottom numbers as each other, then we'd be all set. we'd have two like fractions and we could add them using our procedure. Okay, but how do we find equivalent fractions that have a common denominator, or the same bottom number? Well, there's two main ways of doing it. In this video, we're only going to learn the first way of doing it, and I like to call this way finding the easiest common denominator. In the next video, we'll talk about another method that some of you may have already heard about. It's called finding the least common denominator. Okay, so how does this easiest common denominator method work? Well, even though this is an easy method, it might sound a little complicated at first. But don't worry, it'll make a lot more sense once you've seen a few examples. In this method, the common denominator is always going to be the product of the bottom numbers. In other words, it will be the number you'd get if you multiplied the bottom numbers together. Basically, all we're going to do is take the two different bottom numbers and make two different whole fractions using them. Then, we're going to move the whole fractions to the opposite sides and multiply them by our unlike fractions. Doing this will give us two new equivalent fractions that will have the same bottom number. Then, we can add or subtract them easily. Okay, let's try a couple examples so we can see this method in action. Let's add the fractions 2 over 5 and 1 over 3. These are not like fractions because they have different bottom numbers, so we're going to change them. And the common denominator we will use is the product of the bottom numbers. 5 times 3 equals 15. We change them by multiplying each fraction by a whole fraction. The first whole fraction is going to be 3 over 3 because 3 is the second fraction's denominator. And the second whole fraction is going to be 5 over 5 because 5 is the first fraction's denominator. Next, we multiply starting with our first fraction. On the top, 3 times 2 equals 6. And on the bottom, 3 times 5 equals 15. So our first fraction has become 6 over 15. Now for the second fraction. On the top, 1 times 5 equals 5. And on the bottom, 3 times 5 equals 15. So our second fraction has become 5 over 15. Now we just add them using our procedure for adding like fractions. We add the top numbers, 6 plus 5 equals 11, and then we keep the same bottom number, which is 15. So that means the answer to 2 over 5 plus 1 over 3 is 11 over 15. That's pretty easy, huh? All right, let's see one more example of this method. Let's add the fractions 7 over 8 and 3 over 10. Our common denominator for this problem is going to be 80, because that's what we get when we multiply the denominators together. 8 times 10 equals 80. We'll multiply our 7 over 8 by the whole fraction 10 over 10. And we'll multiply our 3 over 10 by the whole fraction 8 over 8. Then, when we do our multiplication, the 8 times 10 will give us 80 on the bottom of both fractions. For the top of the first fraction, we have 7 times 10 equals 70. And the top of the second fraction, we have 3 times 8 equals 24. Now that we have like fractions, we can just add the top numbers. 70 plus 24 equals 94. And keep the bottom number the same, 80. So, 7 over 8 plus 3 over 10 equals 94 over 80. Some of you see that this answer could be simplified. Be sure to check out our videos on mixed numbers and simplifying fractions to see how you could do that for your final answer. Alright, that's the first way you can find the common denominator and change your unlike fractions into like fractions so you can add or subtract them easily. Remember, practice is really important in math, so be sure to do the exercises for this section so you really get the hang of it.